Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump hints the US might join a meeting between Zelensky and EU leaders this weekend despite being sick of them. The US Treasury has imposed sanctions on 6 more ships after seizing an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast. And punching into the weekend, the final of the IBA World Boxing Championships takes place in Dubai alongside a battle for the WBA World Heavyweight title. Now, President Donald Trump has hinted that the US may attend a meeting with Zelensky and his European allies this weekend at an impromptu leaders summit. It comes after his White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, says he is extremely frustrated with both sides of this war and he is sick of meetings just for the sake of meeting. For more on this, I'm joined by former senior CIA officer Robert Grenier. Robert, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for your time. So, despite his clear frustrations with both Ukraine and Russia, President Trump says he could join talks in Europe this weekend. Are we likely to see him make that journey?
I would be rather surprised if he actually makes the journey himself. I think he's also made it relatively clear in recent days that he doesn't want to get personally involved again unless and until he actually has an agreement in prospect that he can then sit down and bless with others. That said, things are really reaching a bit of a crescendo here. I think that we should take Caroline Leavitt at her word when she says that President Trump is getting very, very frustrated with the situation as it exists right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Donald Trump has expressed his frustration in the past when it comes to trying to push a deal over the line with Ukraine and Russia. But Zelensky says the US has offered to create a free economic zone in the contested eastern Donbass region. Will this break that diplomatic deadlock over territory? And who will police this zone? And could we see US boots possibly on the ground?
Well, starting with the last, I think there's absolutely no chance that there would ever be U.S. boots on the ground. I don't think that President Trump would want to do it, and I don't think that the Russians and President Vladimir Putin would ever accept it, because that would constitute some form of Western security guarantee, and that's something that President Putin clearly wants to avoid. I think in talking about this so-called free economic zone, you just pointed to some of the key questions here. Frankly, the proposal raises many more questions than it answers. And clearly the point of military control of this area would be extremely important. And it seems as though that establishment of such a zone, if that were conceivable, would involve the withdrawal of Ukrainian military forces from all of the Donbass to include territory that is currently under their control, that has never been seized successfully by the Russians. And that would leave Ukraine very, very vulnerable to a recommencement of hostilities on the part of the Russians in the future.
And Russia says it's not seen the revised peace plan after discussions between the US and Ukraine. I think one of the big questions many people are asking is what happens if Russia doesn't like parts of the revised proposals? Has all the shuttle diplomacy that we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks just been a complete waste of time?
I think there's a great chance that, in fact, all of this shuttle diplomacy has been a complete waste of time. Let's remember that these negotiations involve the Ukrainians, the Europeans, and the Americans essentially negotiating amongst themselves. The Russians have established a maximalist position, and they haven't budged from it. They think that time is on their side. They think that the dynamic is working in their favor. They have very little reason to make further concessions right now, or to make any concessions right now. And so, again, we're seeing a situation where the West is negotiating amongst themselves, and there's no indication that whatever they come up with will ever be acceptable to the Russians.
And I think this is the big concern for Europe, isn't it? Because this is what Europe have been saying time and time again. We heard the NATO secretary yesterday, Mark Rutte, really warning other countries that they could be Russia's next target. And also we heard from one of the high-ups in the UK today, and I thought it was quite interesting also what he said. So as a former CIA officer yourself, how much of a threat is Russia to Europe right now, do you think? And we're always hearing that could this become a full-blown war?
Well, I do think that Russia does pose a very serious long-term threat, not only to Ukraine, but to much of Europe as well. Now, whether they would have designs on France is not entirely clear, but they certainly would have designs on Poland, the Nordic countries, and I don't think there's any question but that the Europeans right now already see themselves in an existential conflict with Russia. Ukraine is the front line, but I think they very much see this as only the front line. The difficulty for the Europeans right now is that they realize that they are essentially on their own. The problem is that they are simply not in a position right now to fully defend themselves from Russia. They have become highly dependent on the U.S. security guarantee. That has to do with missile defense. It has to do with intelligence, other aspects of their collective national defense. They simply cannot stand up to Russia on their own yet. They're scrambling to address that. They can't do it right away. And so it's very important for them somehow, for at least some period of time, to keep the Americans on side. And that is becoming increasingly difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've spoken to many people from the European side on the show here, and they are extremely concerned about Donald Trump and also his move to almost side with Russia if we had a look at that 28-point peace plan. So that is a very big conversation, Robert, happening right now in Europe and in those circles. But I just want to ask you a little bit about Putin, because world leaders, including Vladimir Putin and Erdogan, are gathering in Turkmenistan today. Turkey's president has called for a limited ceasefire in Russia's war with Ukraine, targeting ports and energy facilities. Does Erdogan and Turkey have any game here? Can they convince Putin to do a limited ceasefire at the moment?
No, I think that what President Erdogan is trying to do is to play a responsible role, to use what influence he has. But I just don't see any scope right now for the Russians agreeing to a limited ceasefire. They just don't think that it would be in their interest.
And it's really interesting because we're talking about what's happening abroad when it comes to Donald Trump. He's obviously involved in this negotiation to try and end the war between Russia and Ukraine. But domestically, things are happening in the US too. And Robert, the Democrats have just released new images from Jeffrey Epstein files that do include pictures of President Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and Steve Bannon and many others. How damaging could this be for the US president? Because right now we see him trying to end these wars abroad, but at home, there's more trouble bubbling when it comes to these Epstein files.
Yeah, I think that the real struggle for the U.S. in terms of its domestic political politics and from the perspective of the president is that his hard coalition, his mega coalition, so-called, is beginning to fall apart. Now, I don't want to overstate that, but it's clearly fraying right now. And I think that the images that you've just described are going to make it more difficult for him to keep certain elements of his own coalition on side. At the same time, you see some within his own party who are clearly uncomfortable with the stance that he's taking vis-a-vis Ukraine. The U.S. domestic political situation is becoming much more complicated, and it's much more difficult for the president to get his own way in all instances, even within his own party.
And just a quick thought, I feel like of late we've seen Donald Trump growing more and more frustrated when he does give these impromptu talks that he often does in the Oval Office and to reporters and when he's doing events. Do you think that is because we're seeing fracturing in the MAGA base and things are just getting more difficult?
Well, it certainly doesn't help for the president that he's having difficulty with his own coalition. There's no question about that. With regard to the Ukraine and his growing frustration, I think it's very clear that what President Trump wants to see is an agreement. He almost doesn't care what the details are. He just wants to see an agreement. He wants to get this behind him so that he can establish business as usual with the Russians, reintegrate them in the Western economy, lift sanctions. He thinks that there are opportunities for the United States, and also, I think, some real opportunities for members of his family and those who are closest to him. Quite frankly, there is a breathtaking level of corruption at work right now within the U.S. administration.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Business as usual, saying that. Robert Grenier, always brilliant to have you on. Thank you so much for your insights there.
You're very welcome.
For more on this, I'm joined by Ukrainian MP Leigh-Ann Gerrans. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you on the show with us. Can we just begin with Zelensky, because he sent the revised peace proposal to Washington for review, and this comes after weeks of shuttle diplomacy. Do you think Ukraine and Europe have done enough to please Donald Trump?
Hello. Yes, good evening. So the thing is, it is shuttle diplomacy. And as it has rightly been pointed out by the previous guest on this show, it's as if Europe, Ukraine and the US are negotiating among themselves, and Russia is really just really firm on the same thing that it has been saying since 2022, and in fact since 2014, when it has first invaded Ukraine, that it wants Ukrainian territories, and if it doesn't get them, it will go on further with the aggression. The problem is that even if Russia is given these territories in question, Russia will still go on further with the aggression. It will never stop. Appeasing the aggressor has never worked. It hasn't worked during the Second World War times. It will not work now in the 21st century, because simply if aggression is tolerated, if the aggressor is rewarded rather than punished, he will go on with the wars and waging more wars, even more intense wars, and expanding them to further territories. And it is right that there is a very big concern in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, that Russia will further go on with its aggressive ambitions and territorial claims to include the Baltic states, to include Central Eastern European states like Czechia, Poland, Slovakia, and so on. Because Putin is on the prowl, and his goal, his ambition is to rebuild the Russian Empire. It's a colonial war that is being fought, and it's a war that has the aim to restore the big Russia with all the lands adjacent to it. And of course, Europe, the European leaders, they do not want that, because it's one thing to be neighboring and to have the borders with democratic countries, and Ukraine is a democratic country, and it serves today as a buffer zone between the democratic world and the authoritarian regime that has been instated in Russia for decades now, with Vladimir Putin as the leader of this authoritarian autocratic regime.
So I know that some people will be watching this, and we hear your concerns about Russia going deeper into different European countries, the Baltic states. But I wonder, do you really believe Russia is strong enough militarily to do that? Because Russia did invade Ukraine. They are the aggressor. That was 4 years ago, but they didn't achieve what they set out to achieve. And the Ukrainians have put up an absolutely massive fight and actually managed to hold off Russia. Do you think it's a bit of an exaggeration to believe that they do have a strong enough army?
So a minor correction here, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and then going into Donetsk and Luhansk region. And in 2014, 2015, Ukraine has signed the so-called Minsk agreement with Russia, which called on a ceasefire which was never respected by Russia, even not for one day. There have never been, from 2015 until 2022, there has not been been a single 24 hours straight of a full ceasefire that has been respected by Russia. So this tells us about signing deals with Russia. In 2022, Russia escalated this aggression, and they were hoping, because this time from 2015 till 2022, these 7 years, it brought Russia the possibility to amass their military power, to have the confidence to escalate the aggression, to escalate the war, in the hope that they will reach Kyiv within 3 days, within hours, as they were hoping. The thing is, Ukrainians are a very resilient people, and we also were preparing for these 7 years with what we could, because we were limited, very much limited also by our foreign allies, international allies, and what we could do militarily. And another factor is that Ukraine is a huge country. Ukraine is the biggest country in Europe. We're the size of France. So this also is what is has prevented from Putin from taking the whole country. But if you talk about countries like Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, they're tiny countries, much smaller than Ukraine, much, much smaller than Ukraine. For Putin to take on them would really be a matter of hours. And that's where the concern lies.
So the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said Donald Trump is sick of meeting for the sake of meeting. Is Ukraine worried about the US pulling away as Russia's war machine continues to grind on? Because, of course, the Europeans and the US are supporting Ukraine when it comes to money and weapons.
Money and weapons is key for Ukraine to be able to keep standing. But there are two factors here. First of all, the US has withdrawn its military support to Ukraine since March this year. Since 3rd of March this year, we haven't been receiving the weapons and the weapon systems. And Ukraine, to be frank, is running out of ammunition that we can either get as aid from the United States or even buy from the United States. So technically speaking, we are relying now on what we are producing and what Europe is producing. As I said, the leaders of the countries in the EU, but also in the whole of the European region, they are very much concerned about the situation, because it also means that it affects their own defense and security and their own defense and security capabilities. This is why we are all interested in Europe to have US in the game, to have the US with skin in the game, and the US backing our defense capacities, our collective European defense capacities. But if the US steps away, this is also an option that is very much in everyone's minds. It's a very risky option, but a very real one right now. And I think it's one which has caused many European leaders to wake up, to increase the defense and security budgets, to increase and simplify the defense procurement systems, and increase the defense manufacturing in all possible areas. So I think this has caused Europe to really mobilize its efforts. Of course, it would be much easier if the US didn't pull out, but I think we are preparing for the worst case scenario as well.
And the US wants Ukraine to withdraw from the Donbass and create a free economic zone. What do you make of this?
It's a great idea. The question lies in how to technically ensure that that area will really be a free economic zone. A free economic zone means a zone where trade can go on and where economic activity can go on, where industrial parks can be opened up, where industries can thrive, not where there's constant shootings, where there are prison camps, torture centers, and so on and so forth, which is what the Donbass has really become now. So in order for the economic zone to exist, there needs someone who will come in, clean up the area from any military activity, and then ensure the security in that area. To be honest, I don't see how Russia is going to concede to that. They are probably going to insist that it will be their own military units or police units who are going to be ensuring the security in that free economic zone. But in reality, that will mean that there will be no possibility for Ukrainian commercial activity there, because it simply will be too dangerous for any Ukrainian parties to enter and to make any kind of commercial activities in that area.
And
I think there will be also a lot of skepticism from a lot of Ukrainian allies as well, who have shown great support to Ukraine, not just in words, but in action as well.
And I just want to ask you one final thought of yours. EU leaders are meeting for one last push to secure a deal to fund Ukraine with frozen Russian cash. Moscow says the frozen asset seizure would be illegal. Why does Ukraine want Russia's money right now?
Well, look, it's because it's not just Russia's money. It's money which it's assets which are sitting frozen in European banks, financial institutions, which should be used to rebuild Ukraine. But before we go into the rebuilding stage, we need this money to defend Ukraine and to push back on Russia's aggression. And this money, it's being taken away from Russia. It's normal reflective measure as to the crime of aggression. There's a crime, there needs to be a punishment. This is the punishment, this is the sanction, the taking away of the money. For us in Ukraine, as well as for many Europeans, by the way, it's really unclear. Why should it be the United States or Europe or taxpayers in any country for that matter paying for defending Ukraine and for rebuilding Ukraine, when it is Russia that is committing the crime, that it is Russia that is on a daily basis and nightly basis launching mass attacks with missiles, drones, destroying our infrastructure, hospitals, schools, energy systems, housing. They are the culprit here. So they should bear the burden of all of this rebuilding process and all of the financial implications that come with it. So it's only a natural step. And of course, Russia is really scared of this cash, these assets becoming unblocked and becoming available for Ukrainians' defense, because they know that even if the US pulls out in that case, that money will be enough to make sure that Ukraine can go on defending itself and pushing back on Russia for a number of years.
Very good point. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Alessia. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. And as always, I wish you well.
Thank you.
The US Treasury has imposed sanctions on 6 more ships after seizing an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast yesterday. It also put sanctions on 3 nephews of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. For more on this, I'm joined by Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, Elizabeth Braw. Elizabeth, it's brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me. So, as I just mentioned, the US has further increased sanctions on Venezuela as tensions between the 2 countries do escalate. Is the US pushing for a regime change?
Well, it's clear that the United States is interested in seeing the Maduro regime replaced. But what's, I think, the most interesting part of it is how it's going about it. And the seizure of the Venezuelan shadow tanker this week was the most high-profile effort or part of that effort so far. And that matters because Venezuela depends on oil exports, and to export oil, it depends on these shadow tankers. And that's the way Russia operates as well when it exports its sanctioned oil. And let's see what happens next, whether the United States decides to detain another Venezuelan shadow tanker.
What I find really interesting is Trump's made it clear the war on drugs is the main reason why he's bearing down militarily on Venezuela. But you've just mentioned oil. Is oil really the #1 reason why the US wants Maduro out and they want to change at the top in Venezuela?
No, I don't think oil is the main reason, but oil is Venezuela's most important source of revenue. That's why the Americans are targeting it. And it's the same thing with Russia. Oil is Russia's most significant source of income, which is why it's focusing so heavily on exporting its oil using the shadow fleet. when it comes to Venezuela and drugs, it is clear that the other countries in the region, Latin, South America, that are pose an equal concern when it comes to smuggling of manufacturing or growing of drugs and then smuggling of those drugs to the United States. But for reasons that I think can't fully be explained, the Trump administration has decided to focus on Venezuela and essentially to weaken the regime by targeting it in various ways, by attacking so-called drug boats, but now most significantly by detaining this massive shadow tanker. And we are talking about a very, very large vessel, as it's called, a VLCC, so a very large crude carrier. These are giants of the ocean. It has now been detained and will be taken to a US port.
So in his latest threat to Venezuela, Donald Trump has warned land strikes on drug shipments could begin soon. Is the US president legally able to do this? And how concerning is this rhetoric for the whole region?
It is interesting to see these actions because diplomatically put, they are not actions that would ordinarily be considered. The detention of this VLCC, so very large crude carrier, shadow tanker, was somewhat legally dubious, but clearly has been signed off by US government lawyers. The reality is, when you are an extremely powerful country, you can afford to do to take actions, to do things that smaller or less powerful countries would not be able to do. Smaller, less powerful countries need the protection of international conventions, rules, laws when they act, simply because they don't have the force to implement whatever it is they want to do. Whatever international laws and conventions and treaties say, I think we can safely assume that the US government will continue pursuing its various actions against Venezuela, because it has decided that this is the country it wants to focus on. And by the way, those actions include the recent announcement by Donald Trump that Venezuelan airspace would be closed, presumably by the United States.
And Elizabeth, what is President Trump's end game when it comes to Venezuela? What does he actually want to achieve?
He and other members of his administration have made no secret of the fact that they want Maduro gone. Now, this is not unique to the Trump administration or indeed to the United States. Maduro is an autocrat. He has clung on to power by defying the most recent election result. So there is a legitimate cause to want to remove him, and various countries have tried in recent years by imposing sanctions. That's why Venezuela is using the shadow fleet, because it is under sanctions and can't export its oil using legal means, or using the official fleet of oil tankers. But the international sanctions haven't gone very far. I think your viewers may remember a few years ago there was an election and a decision by the international community to recognize the Speaker of the Parliament as of the Venezuelan parliament as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you stand, but either way, that move failed. That speaker had to leave the country. The Speaker of the Parliament and who was the designated president had to leave the country, and Maduro remained in power until the recent election that he essentially ignored. So it's not a secret that the international community considers him an illegitimate president, ruler, but the question so far has been what to do about it. Now, what's important to remember is that while the United States may be trying to forcefully dislodge him, he has powerful supporters, including, crucially, Vladimir Putin, who has just made a phone call to him to essentially affirm his support.
Yeah, absolutely. Elizabeth, thank you so much. Great having you on the show.
Thank you.
Thailand's king has endorsed a decree to dissolve parliament following a request made by the Prime Minister, paving the way for elections earlier than actually previously planned. It comes as Anutin Charnvirakul is coming under mounting pressure over a legislative impasse and a deadly border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. Patrick Falk reports.
Anutin Charnvirakul's petition to dissolve parliament comes less than 100 days after he was sworn in as head of a minority government. Tension has been simmering between his Bumchai Thai party and the opposition People's Party, the biggest force in the House. It had previously backed Anutin on the condition he'd meet demands, including that he'd start the process of amending the constitution. But the demands weren't met, and cracks began to emerge.
We have to accept that we became government thanks to the support from the People's Party. We have been trying to proceed with amending the constitution as part of the agreement.
The political turmoil coincides with ongoing fighting between Thailand and Cambodia. Several people have been killed and hundreds wounded in clashes reignited early this week over a long-running border dispute. Hundreds of thousands of people on both sides have been displaced as a result. Thailand's leader says the dissolution of parliament won't have any impact on the conflict. Villagers that have fled were undecided.
There's no one to decide what's next. The Prime Minister should be deciding if he will do a ceasefire or not. If we don't have a Prime Minister, what are we going to do? Who will make the decisions?
Whether we have a Prime Minister or not, there's no certainty. The government has never cared about solving the border conflict anyway. I've always had to flee from the clashes a number of times.
Anutin now faces an uphill task to be re-elected. Opinion polls consistently put the Liberal opposition ahead. The Prime Minister has also struggled to lift Thailand's sluggish economy. The conflict with Cambodia has only added to the uncertainty. Patrick Falk, Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Reddit has filed a lawsuit in Australia's High Court seeking to overturn the social media ban for children. The firm, which ranks Australia amongst its biggest markets, said the ban is an intrusion on free political discourse. The platform argues it should not be subject to the law, saying it operates more as a knowledge-sharing forum for adults than as a traditional social network. Disney has agreed to invest $1 billion in OpenAI as part of a deal which will enable users to recreate the franchise's characters on ChatGPT and video generation tool Sora. It is the first major studio to license parts of its catalogue to the tech giant. Following the announcement, Disney shares rose by more than 2%. Turning to all the sports news now, and Liverpool boss Arne Slot says he will speak to Mo Salah before deciding on the forward's availability for the upcoming match against Brighton. Salah accused the Reds of throwing him under the bus after he was left on the bench for the last 2 weeks' draw at Leeds. The Egyptian player claims his relationship with Slot has become non-existent. And Roger Federer will return to the court to headline the battle of the world number ones at the 2026 Australian Open. The 20-time tennis major champion will be back at the Rod Laver Arena for the first time since he retired back in 2022. The match, which will be held before the official tournament, will include a tribute to the Swiss player himself. Now, the IBA World Championships is taking place in Dubai this week and this weekend. It's all about the ram-up. The finals kick off at the duty-free tennis stadium tomorrow with the WBA World Heavyweight title up for grabs tonight between Povlev and Gassivaz. Bulgarian veteran Povlev will be looking to defend his title against the 32-year-old Russian Gassiev in what has been called one of the most explosive heavyweight bouts for the year. I'm now joined by Chris Roberts, OBE, the CEO of the IBA, as well as boxer Rampage Jackson. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. Chris, I just actually want to begin with you. So let's start with you. It's the men's final tomorrow. Who has impressed you so far? Yep. And who will fans be really watching out for?
So, yeah, it's been a fantastic event. We've got 13 World Championship finals tomorrow. We've got the Russian National Federation, we've got the Kazakhs, and we've got the Uzbeks. So it's been a strong contingent across Asia and Europe across the East. But fantastic event, and really looking forward to a strong finals tomorrow.
And Rampage, tonight we have a WBA World Heavyweight title up for grabs, of course, with Kabrat Pulev taking on Murat Gassiev. Can Pulev defend his title, do you think? Is he favourite to win?
I think Pulev has a good chance of keeping his title, but you can't count out that. He's really good as well. So I'm looking forward to a great fight.
So it's really interesting because I had a look at some statistics. I had them with me, but I've seemed to have lost them. Rampage, I'll come to you. Because Pulev's not young. He's 44 years old. He's fighting someone slightly younger than him. Do you still think he's got gas in the tank?
Well, it's all about the dog in the fight. Sometimes age is just a number, but statistics does show that a younger man wins more often, but hopefully he can pull it off. Come on, let's give him a break.
Okay, let's give him a break. I'll be fair to him. Chris, so we've been talking about this big fight that's happening tonight. What is your take on it? Who do you reckon is going to make it?
Well, I don't want to say here. I'm just going to hold it back a little bit because I think, it's been really interesting having both fighters here. I've kind of been in the background, with on the administration side. So both great guys, great opportunity. Really great to have this event in Dubai with IBA. So I'm looking forward to the end state results. I'm going to hold my cards close. Probably not right, but that's what I'm going to do.
Very diplomatic of you, Chris, almost like a politician. But thank you there. Let's stick with you, Chris, because we have to talk about this upcoming Anthony Joshua-Jake Paul fight that's going to be happening. And many are saying that this event would be banned in the UK. I don't know what your thoughts are on this event, but do you agree that it shouldn't go ahead?
I think there's a lot of great, it provides opportunity, and I think it's a really great thing that is happening in sport. We've got to look at the sporting ecosystem. It's not just about what we're we're talking about politics and other bits and pieces, but for me, I think this is just great for the public. It's great for the sport. And again, I was talking today to Johnny Nelson about this, and we're really looking forward to what that may bring. Good adversity for boxing, great opportunity for people to see and be part of something different. So in the UK, we're talking about licensed, unlicensed boxing. It's different, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. Let's see what AJ does. Let's see where he's at.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where AJ's at, because we haven't seen him for a little while. And I lived in London for a long time when AJ was at the peak of his fighting, and there was almost so much hype around his fight. So it'd be good to see him back in the ring. Rampage, I don't know, your thoughts on Joshua and Jake Paul?
I think this is a fight, just a money grab, and I think it should be entertaining. Anthony Joshua is a great champion, and Jake Paul coming from a YouTube star, and taking love to the sport of boxing. I think it's a great thing. And I think a lot of boxing critics don't like the fight, but I like it because it should be entertaining. And that's what I like to do. I like to entertain people and I like to watch entertainment. So it should be a great fight.
It's really interesting because I have heard that, Rampage, and I want to pick up on that with you because many people have said this is just an exhibition. It's all about entertainment, and boxing's losing some of the credibility that it did have before all these big ticket fights with Jake Paul. We saw Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fight. That was quite criticised too. Do you think boxing's sort of losing the tradition by going down this exhibition route?
No, not at all. In my opinion, I think that those exhibition fights is just entertainment. Like those guys are not trying to move up the ranks or, get belts or anything. And let traditional boxing go on with the guys climbing up the ranks and fighting each other, and let the guys who love the sport of boxing do exhibition and, make money and generate money for their family and entertainment. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay, and Chris, let's talk to you. What about the upcoming fight? I've just mentioned him, between Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather. Are you surprised that this is coming to fruition? Or is the kind of boxing combination mainstream fans want to see? Because I'm not going to lie, when I did watch that Mike Tyson fight with Jake Paul, I woke up to watch it. Of course, I watched the whole fight. I kind of felt a bit bad for Mike Tyson because I loved watching him when I was younger, growing up. He was so agile, but he'd kind of lost it.
I wouldn't say that Mike's lost it. Mike will never lose it, and I think it's great for people to see Mike going out there doing different things. For me, whilst we talk about exhibition of boxing, this is a separate thing to what we're doing here. It's different business. We've got our IBA Pro event here. We've got the amateur event, World Championships tomorrow. This, what we're talking about here, is something completely different. So it's just interesting to see, people getting together, taking part in these events, and everyone likes to see Mike Tyson. Doesn't matter what he's doing.
Yeah, I remember seeing him in The Hangover. But Rampage, I want to ask you a little bit about, I mean, that film. Mike Tyson did a great job, didn't he, Rampage? Let's be honest,
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you.
But I want to speak to you a little bit about the actual event, Rampage, that's happening in Dubai. And Chris, you just touched on it. How important is this event for grassroots boxing and for boxing as a whole? And how has it been in Dubai? Has it gone down really well? Have you been impressed?
I've been very impressed with this event. I've never seen such a big crowd at an undercard event, and the main card is about to start. And what they're doing for the amateurs is unheard of. They're giving like a large pool of money. That's unheard of. I wish more promoters would step up and start doing this for the sport. You guys really deserve it. Amateurs, they fight 100, 200, 300 fights before they see any money. So, this is great.
And Chris, just touching on that, do you think we've seen any stars come up really in the amateur boxing that's been happening in Dubai?
We've got a plethora of stars here already. We've seen some new boxers coming through, new talent, but in particular, again, we see the high shiners with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and the Russian team, and being really strong. Previous world champions are competing here in Hassan Boy, and we've got Olympic champions here boxing as well. So I think what we've done here is we've provided a great opportunity for boxers to come. It's been an open world championships, not a qualifying event. So we've allowed boxers to come from all four corners of the globe to compete here on an equal footing from day one, post-draw, and to test themselves in these conditions. And, an open-air event at this arena, at this venue, has been absolutely outstanding from the start end to where we come tomorrow to the final. So we'll see some new stars born tomorrow. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great stadium. Chris Roberts and Rampage Jackson, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Great to have you on. Enjoy the boxing too. A reminder of our top stories. Trump hints the US might join a meeting between Zelensky and EU leaders this weekend, despite being sick of them. The US Treasury has imposed sanctions on 6 more ships after seizing an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast. And the final of the IBA World Boxing Championships takes place in Dubai alongside a battle for the WBA World Heavyweight title. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. Goodbye, and thank you for joining us.